After my accident, my son's incredible response revealed a hidden perspective on life and love. Sarah stared at her reflection. The cast encasing her leg felt like a reminder of every piece of her life that had shattered. 6 months had passed since she lost Matt, but the weight of his absence was now compounded by this painful reminder. With her leg still throbbing from the accident, an overwhelming uncertainty churned in her gut. Could she even return to teaching, a role she had cherished for so long? She had always been the star in her profession, inspiring her students and colleagues alike, yet the thought of re-entering the classroom sent panic racing through her veins. How would she manage? Questions echoed relentlessly in her mind. What if I can't keep the kids' attention? What if my colleagues look at me like I'm some fragile thing that can't hold her own? They had already whispered behind her back, their condescending gazes filled with pity when she attempted to walk into the teacher's lounge. "Mom, you should come to the fundraiser," Alex had said, his voice filled with urgency. She had pulled back then, hesitating. "I don't have the energy, honey." But the truth was, she feared stepping outside her safe space. As a school teacher, she defined herself by her ability to manage a classroom. Yet now she felt like a shadow of her former self, reduced to a woman with a broken leg and immense insecurity. Would Alex see her as a burden instead of the resilient mother they both needed during this chaotic time? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The day of the fundraiser arrived, and as she limped through the community center, she could feel the weight of the eyes on her. While Alex buzzed around, buoying up the energy in the room, she cringed each time someone glanced her way. Would they find her contribution sufficient? Would they continue to murmur about her inability to hold it all together? The tension sat heavy in the back of her throat, pushing against the breath she desperately needed to steady herself. As Sarah set up a small table with cookies and flyers, her heart sank when a fellow teacher called her out, dismissing her offerings with a few careless comments. It felt like knives slicing through her, each word echoing her self-doubt. "She's just here for the sympathy," she overheard. In that moment, the flood of questions that consumed her mind morphed into anguished certainty. Was she only seen as her husband's widow? A broken teacher, maimed by fate? As the fundraiser progressed, though, something changed. The community members rallied, an unexpected wave of support for her and Alex. Her heart caught in her throat as she glanced around the room, realizing that their kindness enveloped her like a warm embrace. Yet even as love filled the space around her, the unwanted thoughts lingered, gnawing at her from within. Would this moment of hope prove to be fleeting? Would she manage to hold on to this flicker of connection, or would the shadows of doubt continue to consume her? Sarah's gaze met Alex's, and in that moment, as uncertainty gnawed at her heart, she wished he could see her as strong, as something more than just a broken teacher. Would she harness the strength they both needed, or would she crumble beneath the weight of societal expectations? As laughter and chatter filled the room, the air thick with hope and despair, Sarah faced an impossible crossroad, both terrified and resolute, to navigate this tumultuous journey with her son at her side. Sarah awoke the next morning to the sunlight filtering through the curtains, spilling golden warmth across her bedroom floor. The cast still encased her leg, a physical manifestation of her fears and chronic uncertainties. Yet something stirred within her, a desire to reclaim her life, to step back into a world she had felt so distanced from for too long. After Alex left for school, she settled at the kitchen table, the faint scent of coffee knitting a sense of normalcy around her. The incident from the fundraiser replayed in her mind, a moment filled with conflicting emotions. Yes, she had felt pity, But within that same breath of despair, something had ignited, a flicker of connection that she had nearly suppressed. Perhaps she could learn to channel that support into a renewed sense of purpose. She considered her lesson plans for the upcoming week. What if she could blend her personal experience, her journey of loss and recovery, into the curriculum? She had always believed in immersive learning, but this time it could be more than just academic. It was about resilience, transformation, and the human capacity to rise from the ashes. Her own story could serve as a bridge to help her students cope with their unique challenges while enriching their understanding of life's complexities. Doubt began its inevitable crawl back into her mind. What would her colleagues think? Would they criticize her for being too vulnerable? But there was a deeper confrontation brewing within. The real question was about her, how she viewed herself amidst the turmoil. If she pulled on the threads of her story, could she not weave it into something meaningful for others? It was a risk, a bold step toward redefining her identity, one that she realized she needed to take. With newfound determination, she took out her laptop and began typing. Her fingers stumbled at first, but as she poured out her thoughts, clarity emerged. She would share not just her story of loss, but also the journey of healing. With every sentence, she faced those lingering doubts head-on, framing them in a narrative that grappled with complexity while also offering hope. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the kitchen filled with a sense of purpose. She was creating a curriculum that transcended mere textbooks. It was infused with lived experience, resilience, and the belief that growth often arises from the most profound difficulties. By the time Alex returned home, Sarah was buzzing with excitement, a stark contrast to the diminishment that had cloaked her for so many months. She shared her idea with him, her voice trembling at times, but brimming with healed hope. Watching her son's eyes brighten at her enthusiasm fueled her confidence further. However, when Alex asked her about her plans to present this to her colleagues, a wave of anxiety sloshed over her. What if they dismissed her ideas? What if they laughed? She felt the weight of expectations press against her once more. Yet, just beneath that fear simmered an unwavering strength. She could not let herself be defined by those murmurs any longer. That night, as she practiced her speech in front of the mirror, staring not only at the fragility of her leg, but the growing resilience in her spirit, she resolved to confront her fears. The classroom awaited not only her return, but also the truth of her journey, the highlighted scars that now served as her badge of survival. She was ready to embrace the challenge. The next day, the principal had called a meeting for all the teachers, a situation that usually left her feeling out of her depth. As she walked down the hallway, the echo of uncertain footsteps tailed her. But this time, she felt the whispers of both fear and courage intertwining in her veins. With each step, Sarah asked herself a compelling question. How would she choose to wield her story in front of her peers? The time had come to face her critics, and perhaps, in that moment of vulnerability, she would discover a powerful truth about herself. As Sarah stepped into the staff room, the murmurs of conversation faded momentarily, eyes darting toward her cast, then quickly shifting back to their discussions. The air was thick with unspoken remarks, but she pushed through, her resolve fortifying with each heartbeat. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. This was not just about her, but about what she intended to share. The principal, Mr. Lawson, stood at the front, his voice a steady anchor amidst the swirling tide of her anxiety. We're here to discuss some upcoming projects that aim to foster a more engaged learning environment. As he spoke, Sarah's mind raced, calculating her chances of being heard. Would she make an impact, or would her voice get lost in the noise? After a brief introduction of various curricular topics, Mr. Lawson turned to her. "Sarah, you have an idea for integrating personal experience into our teaching methods. Would you like to share?" Her heart quickened, a cacophony of encouragement and panic colliding within her. This was it. Standing up, she sensed the eyes of her colleagues upon her, studying her, waiting for something that worked as a more sympathetic focus than the cast on her leg. Clearing her throat, she began. I believe that our experiences shape us, and there's immense value in sharing our journeys, particularly with our students. I want to create a curriculum that blends academic objectives with personal narratives about resilience and healing. As Sarah spoke, she felt the tremors of uncertainty give way to clarity. Her voice grew steadier, infused with passion. I want to introduce storytelling exercises, allowing students to connect their struggles with what they learn in class, fostering a safe space for them to begin unpacking their own narratives. A flicker of interest ignited in some pairs of eyes as she shared snippets of her life, the loss that had birthed her fears and the resilience that demanded she rise above them. She mentioned the value of vulnerability, of strength hidden within openness, and slowly, the initial tension in the room began to dissipate. Yet amidst her rising confidence, a challenge arose. Steve, a veteran teacher known for his pragmatism, interjected, "Isn't sharing such personal experiences risky? Shouldn't we maintain a professional distance?" Her heart sank. The darkness of doubt slithered back into her thoughts. Was she crossing a line? She hesitated for a moment, then visualized Alex's bright eyes, the way he'd encouraged her, turning her vulnerability into strength. With a deep breath, she countered, "Isn't it also risky to ignore the emotional realities our students face? They navigate their own battles daily. Why shouldn't we model resilience through our stories?" A silence enveloped the room, shifting the energy. Sarah noticed nods of agreement. Perhaps she had struck a chord, one that resonated with their own experiences, concealed under professionalism. She pressed on, detailing her proposals and how she envisioned the curriculum bridging academic rigor with emotional intelligence. As she concluded, silence hung in the air, charged, expectant. Mr. Lawson nodded thoughtfully, and others began to voice their support, expressing how powerful connection could be in the classroom. There were no dismissive laughs, no eye rolls, only a wave of camaraderie turning towards possibility. After the meeting, Sarah felt an unexpected rush of elation wash over her. She had not only shared her truth, she had encouraged a conversation about compassion in education. Yet as she walked back through the hallway, exhilaration mingled with apprehension. Had she truly found her voice, or was this a fleeting moment of bravery? Her heart raced as she contemplated the ripple effects of what she had just done. In sharing her story, had she opened doors for her colleagues, or had she inadvertently led herself into a new realm of scrutiny? That night, as she lay in bed, the uncertainty lingered. One question loomed large in her mind, teasing the edge of her thoughts, refusing to be silenced. What would her colleagues think of her once the excitement faded and the inevitable critiques returned? The notion of facing her peers again felt heavier than it did before. The vibrant pulse of the day's success continuously clashed with her anticipation of the inevitable challenges ahead, leaving her awake late into the night, pondering how far she was willing to go to redefine not just her role as a teacher, but as a person forging her own path. Tomorrow, those uncertainties would rise again, igniting a new confrontation that could make or break her resolve. Would she continue to stand boldly in her vulnerability or retreat once more into her fears? The morning sun filtered through the classroom windows as Sarah prepared for another day, her pulse still resonating with the echoes of the previous meeting. She had shared her proposal, but now she was left with something more daunting: anticipation. With each cautious step on her crutches, she wondered how the events of yesterday would ripple through her professional environment. As she entered her classroom, the familiar sense of old books and fresh markers greeted her, an odd comfort in the chaos of her thoughts. She took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand, engaging her students. Today, she would need to step further into her vision, knowing that the students would respond to her readiness to connect. She began by introducing the concept of storytelling. "Today, we're going to discuss resilience," she announced, her voice unwavering despite the apprehension buzzing within her. "I want us to explore our stories, the moments that have shaped us, and how overcoming struggles can be a powerful lesson." The students looked up, intrigued. Their eyes filled with curiosity, both about the topic and her own journey. It was clear she had not just lost a leg. She was beginning to shed the armor of doubt that had overshadowed her confidence for so long. But deep down, the question lingered. How much of her struggle should she truly share? As she explained her storytelling exercise, the bell rang, and in swept Steve, the pragmatic teacher whose skepticism had unsettled her. He looked at Sarah, a half-smirk playing at the corner of his lips. Thought you'd give a serious try at drawing boundaries? Something splintered inside her. Fear turned to defiance. I believe boundaries exist to be challenged, Steve. Our students deserve authenticity, and we wouldn't be modeling it if we remained aloof. Her heart raced with her newfound conviction. The unexpected rebelliousness coursed through her system like adrenaline. Had she just confronted him? Sarah watched Steve's steady demeanor falter, confusion flickering in his eyes. In that instant, Sarah recognized something vital. Her worth as an educator wasn't solely defined by her experiences or their acceptance, but by how she chose to confront adversity, both personally and professionally. It was a liberating revelation. She was not merely a vessel for knowledge, she was a guide, inviting her students on a journey of exploration. As the lesson progressed, Sarah fully embraced the role of storyteller. She shared snippets of her challenges, the loss she had endured, and the strength she had found hidden within vulnerability. Students began to engage actively, their unique narratives bubbling to the surface, creating a mesmerizing patchwork of shared tales that highlighted their collective resilience. Yet, amidst the flourishing rapport, the specter of insecurity remained. How would Steve respond after witnessing this interaction? Would the others now see her as a credible leader, or would she merely become a fleeting figure in their memory? At the end of class, while her students gathered their belongings, she spotted a note on her desk. Heart racing, she unfolded it. Thank you for sharing your story. It made me feel less alone. The words leaped off the page, pressing into her chest with warmth. Perhaps the moments of vulnerability she had begun to embrace were indeed making a difference. Leaving the classroom that day, a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. The students were beginning to change. They were awakening to their own potential through her push towards connection. Yet a nagging doubt still poked at her. Would the forthcoming faculty meetings scrutinize the newfound bond she had encouraged? Returning home, Sarah's mind whirled as she considered what lay ahead. The need for validation fought against the importance of forging her path from a place of understanding. The truest test of her courage approached. Would she establish her narrative, or would she retreat under the weight of professional expectation? The next meeting unfolded with tension enveloping the air. She sensed it, a brewing storm of challenge and revelation just waiting to break. But she was ready to confront it. She was ready to stand in her own truth once again. Little did she know, something unexpected awaited her that would push her determination beyond anything she had prepared for. The following faculty meeting loomed over Sarah like a gathering storm. Sitting in the dimly lit conference room, her gaze wandered around the table, settling on familiar faces, some supportive, others skeptical. The air hummed with anticipation, mixed with a sense of discomfort. She reminded herself of her previous interactions, the warm connections blossoming within her classroom. Those moments ignited a flicker of hope in her heart, but the fear of judgment reared its head anew. As the meeting commenced, Steve initiated the discussion with a pointed remark. I'm curious how the storytelling concept fits within our curriculum. Isn't that a bit too personal for an education setting? His tone wove through the room, effortlessly sowing seeds of discord. Sarah clenched her jaw, her pulse quickening. She could feel her body responding to the challenge. The familiar crutches leaned heavily beside her, but today they served as more than mere convenience. They were reminders of her resilience. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of expectation in all corners. Actually, she began, her voice steady, I believe sharing stories, especially those that reflect resilience, helps build empathy and understanding in our students. It allows them to see beyond textbooks, engaging with the complexities of life in a meaningful way. Steve's brows furrowed, still unconvinced. But isn't that a slippery slope? Personal experiences can skew our teaching. What about boundaries? Watching him, Sarah felt a rush of clarity. Boundaries, she realized, were no longer meant to isolate her. Instead, they were a framework through which she could bring authenticity into education. Boundaries can foster safety, but they shouldn't restrict growth. My students thrive on connection. When they hear personal stories, they see that struggle is universal, not something to hide from. Murmurs spread across the room. Sarah felt a blend of pulsating fear and burgeoning resolve. Could she transform these doubts into something impactful for herself and for them? One teacher nodded encouragingly. I think it's important for our kids to see that we, too, face challenges as part of our lifelong learning process. It makes us more relatable. Sarah grasped this thread like a lifebuoy. Her heart raced. Once more, she leaned into the vulnerability she had begun to embrace. I can share my experiences, and through that, I might inspire them to find their voices. My journey may not be the only one, but it contributes to the tapestry of humanity we should all acknowledge. In that moment, she realized this wasn't merely about defending her teaching style. It was about asserting her perspective, woven indelibly with threads of resilience. She remembered the note from her student, and how personal vulnerability had already begun to forge connections that transcended the classroom walls. Steve's silence hung like an unspoken challenge in the air, heavy with implications. The thought of his judgment clawed at her, yet she refused to allow it to escalate into her old habit of retreating. We are not just educators, we're mentors. Whether we acknowledge it or not, our struggles shape our teaching, and our stories can inspire our students to embrace their individuality. The room fell into an expectant hush. She could sense the shifting tides, some faces reflecting understanding, others still cloaked in skepticism. But something pivotal flickered within her, a steely determination she hadn't anticipated. As the meeting progressed, Sarah craved clarity about her path forward. But with every acknowledgement of her resilience, she felt her foundation strengthen. What awaited her was no longer a stumble into consensus, but a deliberate embrace of who she had become. The meeting concluded, the air still thick with unresolved tension. Sarah felt a duality of hope and uncertainty. Would they truly accept her message, or would Steve's doubts echo louder in the halls? Leaving the room, she felt the familiar weight of anticipation breathlessly pressing at her back. The moments of courage she had reclaimed were ready to unfold further. Only time would tell if those moments would set a larger, more lasting change in motion. As she stepped into the bustling hallway, a thought struck her. Could her own journey of acceptance and authenticity resonate beyond the classroom? What if confronting her personal obstacles could empower others in ways she had yet to imagine? Her next move loomed before her, a choice etched in the fabric of possibility. With each step, she sensed a deeper confrontation stirring within her, a pivotal moment threatening to redefine not just her career, but also her legacy. Would she push forward, ready to reveal the unvarnished truth of her experiences? Or would she fall back on the safety of the status quo? The corridor echoed with the distant sounds of students laughing and the shuffling of feet, a stark contrast to the weight pressing on Sarah's chest. As she walked, her mind raced, the meeting replaying in her thoughts. How had she managed to find her voice in such a turbulent sea of skepticism? Despite the lingering unease, she could feel that familiar flicker of determination igniting once more. She needed to harness that moment, to transition it from a fleeting instance of bravery into a consistent force in her life. Once in her classroom, the hum of the students' chatter warmed her spirit. She had always thrived on these interactions, the spontaneous laughter that echoed off the walls. Today, however, there was an added layer of pressure. Could she encapsulate the freedom she had tasted in the meeting and channel it into her teaching? She took a deep breath as she stepped to the front of the room. Today, We're going to talk about our stories, she announced, her voice resonating with newfound authority. As hushed anticipation settled among the students, she began to weave her own narrative. Threads of her struggles and victories intertwined seamlessly into her lesson. Many of you have faced challenges. I have too, she said, locking eyes with her students. And I want you to know that sharing our experiences can help us learn and grow together. To her astonishment, several students leaned forward, their expressions shifting from disinterest to curiosity. It was not merely a lesson on storytelling. It felt like an invitation to peel back layers and explore vulnerability together. In that moment, Sarah understood a vital insight about herself. She had the power to influence not only through teachings of literature, but also through shared humanity. By engaging her own scars, perhaps she could prompt them to reflect on their struggles and find their own voices. Throughout the day, she continued to encourage participation, asking students to pair up and discuss their own experiences. The room transformed from a traditional learning environment into a safe haven for expression. Some shared past failures. Others recounted times of triumph. Restlessness was replaced by a contemplative hush, punctuated only by the murmurs of encouragement. Yet doubt still gnawed at her. The memory of Steve's skepticism lingered in her mind. Were her attempts to be authentic merely a distraction from the traditional academic rigor expected of her? The thought sparked a conflict within her, oscillating between empowerment and the fear of criticism. That afternoon, with her students engaged in discussion, Sarah settled against her desk, observing the connections they were forging. She began to reflect on her path. Each courageous exchange acted as a stepping stone. Driven by inspiration, she felt an intoxicating rush of potential, not just for her classroom but for herself. But with stark revelations arose deeper questions. As she dissected the impact her openness had on both her students and her own self-discovery, she questioned whether she could take it further. The fear of repercussions loomed, and she now needed to confront not just her colleagues, but her own limitations. Suddenly, a knock at the door jerked her from her thoughts. It was her principal, Ms. Roberts, and Sarah's heart raced. Could this be the moment where her experiment in vulnerability would either flourish or crumble? "Sarah, I'd like to speak with you about your approach in class," Ms. Roberts said, her tone unreadable. Sarah steeled herself, feeling that all her fears might culminate in this encounter. Of course, as she walked out of the classroom, her mind churned with anticipation. Would Ms. Roberts back her bold direction, or would this be a confrontation that stifled her burgeoning voice? Each step toward the principal's office felt heavy with possibility, forcing her to confront the battles unfolding within her as much as those external expectations. Now, with uncertainties swirling in her gut, Sarah realized that she was standing on the brink, teetering between redefining her legacy and retreating into doubt. What would this meeting reveal? And could the lessons she forged in her classroom extend beyond its walls, leading her to profound personal transformation? The air thickened around her, electric with what lay ahead. As Sarah entered Ms. Roberts' office, she felt a chill envelop her. The principal sat behind a polished mahogany desk, her fingers steepled thoughtfully. The walls, adorned with formal accolades, seemed to reflect the conventional expectations she had grappled with all her career. Each award was a testament to a traditional approach, a stark reminder of the path that many educators followed. Would she honor that tradition or consider a new perspective? "Please, have a seat," Ms. Roberts gestured. Sarah perched on the edge of the chair, clutching the hem of her skirt, her heart racing. She had prepared for this moment, but was simultaneously drawn to all that was uncertain. After a brief silence, Ms. Roberts spoke. "I've observed a noticeable shift in your classroom dynamics." A wave of apprehension washed over Sarah. Was this going to be a critique masked as praise? "Your students seem more engaged, more willing to share." "Thank you," Sarah managed, but the uncertainty gnawed at her spirit. Did this mean her approach was valid, Or did it merely highlight the success of her students without affirming her own choices? That said, Ms. Roberts continued, we exist within a system that values measurable outcomes. I'm concerned that your new methods might stray too far from our curriculum standards. The words felt like a punch to the gut, reigniting her cultivated fears. She had shifted her teaching philosophy to foster openness and connection, yet here was the conventional system, looming larger than her newfound confidence. I understand the necessity of adhering to standards, but I believe that this personal approach can lead to better engagement and ultimately deeper learning, Sarah asserted, voice trembling yet laced with conviction. Ms. Roberts maintained eye contact, her expression unwavering, forcing Sarah to reckon with her own fears. The moment became a crucible. She could either back down or lean into what she knew was true. I shared my own struggles with my students. I think showing vulnerability can inspire them to connect, to find their own voices. Isn't that valuable too? Ms. Roberts remained silent, evaluation etched on her face. A part of Sarah wanted to crumble, to apologize for daring to believe that connection held as much power as academic rigor. Still, a flicker of her inner resolve re-emerged, ignited by the very class she had just left. The conversations had resonated. The stories exchanged had forged bonds that transcended standard education metrics. I have to ask, Ms. Roberts began, are you prepared to defend your approach in a staff meeting? There may be pushback, particularly from those who adhere strictly to our traditional methods. A surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. The very notion of standing before her peers to advocate for a personal teaching philosophy sent shivers down her spine. But as she replayed the students' eager faces in her mind, the thought solidified her resolve. She was no longer simply an educator. She was part of a dialogue, a movement that forayed into uncharted territory. Yes, Sarah replied, each syllable heavier with determination. I want to share my experiences and the impact it's having on my students. It's worth the risk. Ms. Roberts nodded slowly, her features softening into a faint smile. Good. I'd like to support you, Sarah, but you'll need clear metrics to prove your approach is not just a deviation. Can you do that? In that moment, the choice crystallized. This was not merely about persuasion, it was about strategy. She could blend her authenticity with data, crafting a case that bridged rigor and relatability. As they concluded the meeting, Sarah left the office with renewed purpose. Each step felt less laden as she took her knowledge and commitment forward. The confrontation had not only tested her resolve, but also propelled her to consider how to balance authenticity with academic viability. With newfound clarity, she envisioned her next lesson, ready to invite her students to document their growth on paper, weaving their narratives into measurable outcomes. She was no longer standing at the brink. She was poised for flight. Yet as she turned back toward her classroom, an unsettling thought crept in. Could her colleagues genuinely see the value in her approach, or would she be met with resistance that undermined her foundations? The challenge ahead loomed larger than ever, igniting both dread and excitement. The moment of truth would arrive soon, and Sarah's path lay ahead, twisting and uncertain. Would she find allies or face solitary battles in this endeavor? The next staff meeting could either cement her vision or push her back into a box she was determined to escape. Sarah returned to her classroom, her mind a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. She could still feel the heaviness of Ms. Roberts' gaze, a mixture of expectation and skepticism. With every step, her earlier determination clashed with a rising doubt. Could she truly stand firm in her beliefs and navigate the intricate hierarchy of education without capitulating? As she entered her classroom, the scent of fresh paper and markers greeted her, familiar yet charged with a new urgency. Glancing at the students who were scattered around, whispering and laughing, she felt a pang of gratitude. These were the moments that reminded her why she ventured off the beaten path. Their engagement was palpable, a testament to the connection she had fostered. But could this connection translate into quantifiable results demanded by the administration? All right, everyone, I have a new project for us today, she announced, her voice steadier than she felt. The class quieted, eyes wide with curiosity. I want you to reflect on how you've grown this semester. You're going to write down your experiences and what you've learned about yourselves. In her mind, Sarah could sense the resistance brewing. How would she measure their stories? Would the narrative of their growth translate into solid data? The questions buzzed through her, a reminder of the imminent staff meeting where these worries would crystallize into a confrontation. As they began their writing, Sarah drifted from desk to desk, peering over shoulders to catch snippets of their thoughts. Each word blossomed into vivid images of resilience and self-discovery. There was Miguel, who wrote about how he learned to express his feelings for the first time. Aisha, who documented the challenges she had faced and how she had learned to persevere. She felt the warmth of their trust pulse through the room. But the joy was tinged with anxiety. These heartfelt anecdotes were powerful but undeniably subjective. How would she present these as evidence of her teaching effectiveness? The looming staff meeting was no longer a distant concern, but an impending storm, ready to disrupt her fragile peace. That evening, Sarah stayed late at school, surrounded by paperwork and scattered lesson plans. She flipped through her planner, searching for a strategy. It was time to compile themes from her students' reflections, look for patterns that demonstrated growth, resilience, and engagement. Her fingers trembled as she filled the pages, trying to transform vulnerable narratives into solid data that Ms. Roberts and skeptical colleagues would appreciate. Suddenly, an email notification popped up on her screen, an invitation for the staff meeting. The subject line was innocuous, but the weight of it bore down on her shoulders. A wave of dread coursed through her. The meeting was her opportunity, yet also the battleground that would determine the future of her approach. With each passing hour, the tension inside her grew. The moments spent poring over student work turned into a quest to find her own decisive moments, not just in the classroom, but within herself. One question echoed clearer than the rest. What was the most significant lesson she learned from her students? Was it their ability to rise up when faced with obstacles? Or was it her own capacity to adapt, to persist against the backdrop of traditional expectations? As she pieced together her findings, a revelation struck her. Perhaps the real evidence wasn't just in the numbers or outcomes on paper, but in the shared human experiences within those written reflections. Could this radical sentiment be the key to framing her argument? Holding on to that thought, she felt a flicker of hope ignite. She would approach the meeting not merely to advocate for what she believed in, but to share a compelling narrative, one that united empirical data with heartfelt storylines. Embracing both worlds might just bridge the chasm she feared. But as she placed her reflections neatly in a folder, dread settled back in. Would her colleagues even care to listen? Would they dismiss her passion as mere idealism? As she locked the classroom door behind her, doubt shadowed her steps. The next morning would usher in the meeting, and with it, the confrontation of her values. The moment of truth was closing in, tightening like a noose around her resolve. Could she truly reconcile her vision with the expectations of the institution? The answers lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be unearthed in the crucible of the staff meeting. The next morning dawned with an unsettling calmness that gnawed at Sarah's stomach. The sun filtered through the classroom windows, casting soft light on the desk where she had spent countless hours immersed in lesson plans and student reflections. Today, however, her focus was fractured, eclipsed by the impending staff meeting. Instead of inspiring her, the atmosphere felt thick and oppressive, a cloud of uncertainty weighing down her resolve. As her students trickled in, their laughter filled the room, a reminder of the sanctuary she had cultivated amidst her inner tumult. Sarah forced a smile, though it felt strained. She felt the urge to communicate the weight of what lay ahead, a battle against an institutional tide that threatened to drown her ideals. But the children weren't ready for her doubts. They needed her to be resolute. "Good morning, class. How about we start with some of your reflections from yesterday?" she asked, hoping their discussions might ground her. As they shared their stories, Sarah became captivated once more by their resilience. It was infectious. The anecdotes, rife with vulnerability, reminded her of the reason she had chosen this path. Each student's voice was distinct, filled with lessons that could shift mountains. She realized how critical it was for them to see pride in their struggles, to hear herself champion their growth, no matter how subjective. Yet, in the back of her mind, doubts pounded like a restless drum. They echoed her fears about the staff's potential dismissal of their experiences as inadequate. How could she encapsulate these profound moments in terms the administration would respect? She jotted more personal notes, grounding her thoughts even as her anxiety climbed. The clock ticked away the minutes until the meeting, each one a reminder of the hard line she was preparing to tread. Just then, Miguel raised his hand, a glimmer of confidence in his eyes. "Ms. Lewis, can we do this more often? Sharing about our feelings and what we learn? It makes me think I'm not just a kid in class." His words felt like a lifeline, but also a stark reminder of what was at stake. "Of course, Miguel," she replied, her own heart lifting with the unexpected weight of their connection. The realization struck her. This ongoing dialogue was not just about improving test scores, but about nurturing human beings, understanding them deeply. And yet, the terror of management's expectations loomed larger than their voices. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Sarah felt a tide of conflicting emotions crash over her. Her students filed out, their laughter fading into the hallways, replaced by the cold metallic chill of impending judgment. She stood at her desk for a moment longer, drawing a deep breath, mentally shoring up her defenses against the skepticism she anticipated. As she moved into the staff meeting, her thoughts remained a tempest of determination and fear. The conference room loomed ahead, a sterile, bright space filled with sharp outlines of colleagues, some already murmuring, others slightly disengaged. Ms. Roberts's authoritative presence dominated the room, eyes scanning for order and clarity. The moment she stepped into the room, the air shifted. Sarah felt each of her hesitations come rushing forward as Ms. Roberts called the meeting to order. But something deep within her ignited. The thought of her students, those courageous storytellers, drowned out her inner critic. Perhaps today was not simply about defending her methods. It was an opportunity to embody the change she wanted to see. When her turn came to speak, she rose slowly, clutching her folder. Every heartbeat seemed amplified in her ears. Could she convey the essence of what truly mattered, the tangible value hidden within subjective stories? "Good morning, everyone. I believe our aim goes beyond just preparing students for exams." The weight of their gazes bore down on her, mingling with a flicker of fierce resolve. It was time to not just present, but to advocate, not only for herself, but for those who had entrusted her with their narratives. As she began speaking, each word became a link in a chain, binding her determination to her purpose. Not just for her students, but in hopes of a broader acceptance of the value they held. But just as her rhythm picked up, an interruption came from the far end of the table. An incredulous remark from one of her colleagues, one she knew would set the tone for all the turbulence to come. "Are we really meant to take fluff like this seriously?" A wave of tension swept through the room, and Sarah's heart fell. Would she be able to counteract the disbelief threatening to unravel her argument? As she prepared to respond, new doubts crept in. Today would determine whether she could defend her beliefs in the face of entrenched skepticism. The moment had arrived for her to redefine what success meant, not just for herself, but for every student whose voice sought acknowledgement amidst the noise. As Sarah stood at the table in the conference room, she felt the weight of her colleagues' skepticism pushing against her. The incredulity in the air felt like a vice threatening to squeeze the very breath from her lungs. Yet, she was no longer merely a teacher buried beneath those perceptions. She was a vessel carrying the stories of her students, ready to advocate for their capacity to inspire growth. With determination flooding her veins, she summoned the courage to respond to the dismissive remark. "I believe that what we often label as fluff is, in fact, the raw material of genuine learning. My students are connecting not just with the curriculum, but also with their own humanity as they navigate their challenges. Each word rolled off her tongue, steady and strong, while the fearful thought of failure began to wane. She caught the attention of several colleagues who had been whispering in the background, their eyes shifting to her with unexpected curiosity. The gesture mirrored a spark of hope. Perhaps they would glean something valuable that lay quivering beneath the surface of conventional assessment metrics. As you can see from the reflections my students wrote, she continued, her confidence building as she gestured to her folder. They understand resilience in ways we often overlook when focusing solely on statistics and grading. Their testimonies detail personal battles that turned into learning moments, transformations that will guide them far beyond our classroom walls. Sarah paused, allowing her voice to resonate. This was her pivotal moment. She watched how her colleagues leaned in, curiosity piqued. The warmth of her students' stories infused courage into her narrative, illuminating the path forward. By integrating our own experiences into our teaching, she pushed on, we create bridges that connect our lessons to the outside world. It teaches students they can rise above obstacles, which is invaluable for their emotional and intellectual growth. She could see nods of agreement emerge from a few faces, but others still carried skepticism. Steve interjected with a calculated tone, "But what about accountability? We can't compromise our standards." "True accountability comes from engaging the whole student, Steve," she countered, a steely tone creeping into her voice. "If we allow them the space to articulate their struggles and triumphs, we foster a learning environment that celebrates personal growth in tandem with academic excellence." Taking a deep breath, Sarah exuded clarity and purpose as she spoke. "I don't suggest we abandon our metrics, but rather enrich them with stories that reflect shared human experiences." The room fell into contemplative silence. She took a few seconds to gauge their reactions, and she felt the distance between her and her colleagues beginning to close. Purposeful, deliberate, her vision was no longer just a daring idea, it now pulsed with potential and relevance. Finally, with her heart racing but centered in her stance, Sarah concluded, "By allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, we create a living curriculum that prepares students not just for academic assessments, but for the profound challenges of life itself." Isn't that the goal of education? The atmosphere shifted palpably. She sensed the openness that had begun to blossom. Ms. Roberts finally spoke, surprising Sarah with a gentle nod of approval. "You raise valid points, Sarah, and I appreciate the integration of emotional intelligence with academic rigor. Perhaps it's time we consider a pilot program to see how these narratives affect student engagement metrics." Sarah felt the relief surge through her, a tidal wave of triumph laced with hard-earned validation. A mixture of anxious anticipation and hope intermingled paved the path for the discussions to continue. As the meeting adjourned, whispers of support flowed through the room, a noticeable change from the initial skepticism. Colleagues approached her to express interest and share their insights on potential collaborations. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a potent realization settle within her. She had not merely navigated this environment, she had carved out a place for her voice and her truth. The weeks following the meeting were transformative. Sarah pioneered the pilot program, infusing her curriculum with a blend of storytelling and academic rigor, showcasing the results her students achieved. The project drew attention throughout the school and sparked similar initiatives in neighboring districts. Perhaps it was not just personal growth, but institutional change that stemmed from her willingness to step into her vulnerability. She had embraced her narrative, inspiring her students and colleagues alike to discover the power woven through authentic experiences. In the quiet moments after the success of the pilot program, as she sat reflecting in her classroom surrounded by the artifacts of learning, Sarah felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had transformed her fears into force, her doubts into direction. With a deep breath, she recognized herself, not just as a teacher, but as an inspiring advocate for embracing humanity within education. Today, she stood resolute in her understanding. True strength lay in connection, and every experience she and her students shared had the weight to change not only their lives, but the very institution they belonged to. Sarah was finally where she needed to be, focused, empowered, and passionately committed to redefining both her legacy and that of her students. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.